Yeah, welcome everyone. And welcome Beatrix, really lovely to see you. This is a great honor because, yeah, actually when I was trying to summarize your experience, actually it was quite hard because you've got a very varied, extensive sort of background. So I've tried to condense it down as much as possible for the benefit of those that have joined us today. So Beatrix Ong MBE, you're a UAL alumnus, and you're here today to really kindly offered to give up your time to share your experiences of not only working in the fashion industry, but also trying to highlight the importance of resilience, which I think is particularly relevant in these uncertain times. So you're a fashion designer and your career spans over 20 years. You've got experience of working through quite varied times over those past 20 years, the Great Recession, COVID-19 pandemic, and other challenging times, which I'm sure you're going to share when we start the conversation. So you're based in London and you were awarded an MBA in 2011 New Year's Honours List, where I think, were you 22? Is that right, Beatrix?
Oh, I think, no, I was 36, I think.
36, okay. Yeah. And that was in recognition of your services to British fashion. Okay. So you're an alumnus of Central St. Martin's and you began your career in fashion, and then you ascended pretty quickly. So you were an intern at Harper's Bazaar in New York. And then before you knew it, you were creative director of Jimmy Choo. Okay. In 2002, you launched your shoe range, which very quickly garnered significant attention and was available worldwide in most of the prestigious stores that we know. So Harrods, Saks, Fifth Avenue, Liberty's, Bakeries Japan, Louisa V. Roma, and Dover Street Market. And in fact, you developed an exclusive collection for Dover Street Market. You have collaborated with some of the most world's respected designers, brands, and artists. And collaborations include not just with footwear, but also luxury travel case maker Globetrotter, sportswear brand Nike, and collectible of limited edition Nike blazers. Okay, so your experience goes beyond footwear. And in recent years, you published your first book, A Bee in a Tree, which I, as I shared before, have invested in and enjoyed very much reading. A Bee in a Tree addresses the ups and downs of life, and it really sort of gives valuable insights into how to overcome difficulties and find new beginnings. It's about a bee who follows her dreams, but she learns that not all dreams go to plan. Very true. But despite this, the very small bee finds magic in an unexpected hero. So with this in mind, today you've joined us very kindly to give your sort of personal outlook on how one deals with uncertainties, anxieties, with a view to recommending tools that you have used to maintain your well-being, and with a view to sharing valuable insights into how best you've coped in difficult times. So we're going to have a discussion between ourselves, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity at the end for questions. So please, Beatrix has actually asked for you not to be shy. So please do ask questions. But my first question to you is, a lot of what you're going to share is based on experience. And I was wondering whether you could give some insights into your journey as to why you like to share advice on managing healthy mental health.
First of all, thank you for having me, Hannah.
Pleasure.
And it's really nice to be able to share with the students what I think has really helped me through some really difficult times. Obviously, the pandemic is a major one that's affected all of us, but I've had some really high highs and low lows in my life. And so I just remember very clearly being a student and having anxiety and fear about what happens, not just not just what happens in college, but also, you know, what happens after, especially if you're graduating. And those things come up again and again. That fear, that anxiety comes up again and again throughout your career. So I just wanted to come back and really share some of the tools that I've really shaped for myself. So as a disclaimer, this is in no way sort of like a medical or scientific talk. It's really like, I've had crappy times and this is how I dealt with it.
So I suppose it's current student to past student to current students, just offering that very valuable advice based on, you know, what you've gone through and you know what life has thrown at you, because that's the way it is. You know, life is unpredictable, and some could argue that that's the beauty of life, because probably would be pretty dull if you knew what was around the corner. Mm-hmm. But it can also cause a huge amount of anxiety not knowing what the future holds. Okay, so perhaps you would be able to share, you know, some of the tools that you've used to maybe cope with uncertainty. And, you know, you mentioned some of your crappy times, to use your expression, but, you know, what sort of, you know, in those times, you know, what have you done, I suppose?
Well, so first of all is being aware that actually nothing is really predictable. When you're in the fashion industry, you're working so far ahead, right? So now you'd be putting to bed spring, summer 22, getting ready for it to show in September in sort of normal times. So traditionally, like, we're working so far ahead. I mean, I used to sign things wrong all the time. I used to date things wrong, and people would be like, you're 2 years out. Because it was like, we're just looking ahead all the time to the unknown, you know, trying to predict what people might be looking for, what they want to buy. So the first step for me was really having awareness that we have no control of what happens in the future. We also have no control of what happens in the past, and that sort of staying in the present is extremely important. I had an experience in South Africa when I went to study great white sharks, where it was so the first couple of days was so jarring because everything is dependent on the weather. And so you'd never know when you had to be on the boat. You could be on the boat at 4 a.m. to a no sea day, which is basically you don't go out on the boat at all. But you wouldn't find out until the earliest 8 p.m. the night before. So you can imagine, for someone like me who's so used to designing things like 2-3 years in advance, suddenly being in this situation, I'm like, what do you mean I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow? Was such an eye-opener, and it did cause me a lot of anxiety at first, but you know, humans are incredible and we can adapt to things very quickly, and very quickly, in like 2 to 3 days. I got so used to not knowing, and then realizing it wasn't important. It wasn't important to know what I was, you know, whether I could go on the boat or not. I would decide that when it happens. And that really not just brought me, it sort of yanked me into the now. And I think like that is an extreme, that's sort of like the biggest lesson I've learned in sort of dealing with changes.
Did you almost find it quite liberating when you realized that? Yeah,
absolutely, because it was really so different from what I'd ever known or learned before. But that's the amazing thing about nature, is that change is inevitable. And just because it doesn't mean that we have to suffer.
Yeah, we can't control everything. And I think it's common to stress and want to control everything, but actually that can be exhausting because you're never going to be able to control everything.
No, exactly.
Did it change in any way the way, you know, after that experience, you came back and then started planning your collections, or?
Well, I just saw it in a different way, you know. I was able to sort of differentiate like how I worked with how I looked after myself. And I think that's really important, because like all these things you go through, I mean, like you kindly said in that lovely introduction, I mean, I've been through a lot, like not just with business, but personally too, health-wise, family, and all these things come up. There's no way of controlling them whatsoever. And so the best you can do is really look after your own vessel, as it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things that you just prompted me to think about. I suppose the first thing is centers around change and not being able to control everything that happens. And I suppose given where we are now, we can't really avoid, you know, talking about COVID. And obviously that was something that was out of our control, and, you know, like was sort of was a big change in our lives that came very fast. So could you perhaps sort of just reflect on how you felt back in March 2020 when, you know, we went into lockdown, but already, you know, we'd had news coming across from China sort of in 2019.
I mean, at the beginning of 2020, I was actually in America. So I was in Portland, Oregon at Nike. And there were sort of, I don't know, I guess whispers about it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem to be a concern to a lot of people. And certainly in terms of planning, just went ahead and planned as normal. So when March lockdown happened, I think it was the same as everyone else, which is, I think you'd abbreviate it to WTF. It was really like, so what happens now? You know, how long is this going to go on for? How's it affecting us? How dangerous is it? Can we even go out? So I remember first lockdown, you know, a lot of people not even going out into the streets, even for that 1 hour of exercise. It was still fairly, you know, it's frightening. But I think with change, like what I've learned is that you could look at it from a point of fear and think about all these things. And especially when you have the news and it's like, it's just relentless. You know, and obviously at that time, President Trump was around. And so it was just one thing after the other. Is you can look at it from that point, or you can look at it from a point of light and an appreciation. So like for me, and I mean, I say this now, which is like, it's a choice and it sounds relatively easy. It isn't ever easy, but to make that choice and say, what is the gift here? Like, what is it that is happening that may be beneficial to me? And as soon as I started thinking like that, things really opened up. So I was like, I haven't been running in ages. I'll go running. I'll take that hour to go running. The major gift it gave me was time. So normally I'd be on a plane, I'd be on a project, I'll be, you know, traveling a lot. And suddenly I was like in London for more than a month. You know, that's unusual. So I was like, you know, what is it that I keep saying to myself, when I have time, I'll do that, you know? And that, for me, that's like 20 years of saying that, you know, I'll do that when I've got time. So then I wrote a list of like all the things that I said, and on the top of that list was sign language. I've always wanted to learn sign language. So before, I've always been like, if I'm going to learn something, it's got to be beneficial for work. It's going to, you know, so I learned Italian, I did Spanish, you know, like, but what I really like to do if I have time is learn sign language. And so that's what I did. I went online and I did a diploma in British Sign Language. And then that sort of snowballed into, actually, I quite like to know how to script write, you know. And so in that way that I was forced not to work, which is, you know, of huge concern, of course. But I had to kind of change my mindset and go, okay, what is it that I can really take advantage of? And a major thing for me is my father was ill last year. Previously, I wouldn't have been able to be around as much. And that was a huge gift. You know, normally I'd be overseas or something. So there are all these things, and the way that I've dealt with things is really to choose to look at it not from a point of fear, but from a point of like appreciation and finding what that gift is.
So finding the positive rather than trying to sort of find the negative, or exhausting yourself in trying to change the situation when, you know, actually it's impossible to change the situation because it's come from an external source.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not one to be like, I'm not, my natural state isn't like hippie happy. that is not my natural state. And so what I've learned to do is when I feel any sort of discomfort, any pain, any form of depression, is that I let myself. Because what I've found is if I fight something, is it makes it worse. Like resistance makes it bigger. And so I feel like I'm at that stage of life where I'm just open to everything, right? I'm super vulnerable. I don't mind crying at the drop of, or whatever, you know, like I cry in every Pixar movie, and it's okay too, because that's just what I allow myself. I allow myself to feel those things, no matter how terrible they are. And then what I've discovered is by allowing yourself to feel that hurt, that pain, that horribleness, is that actually it passes through you quicker. Instead of resisting it the whole time, which then almost holds you in that place of real discomfort.
So you're kind to yourself in the sense that you don't get upset or cross or angry if you're feeling upset or
yeah, so the opposite. So if I'm cross, if I'm upset, I am cross and I am upset, and I acknowledge it, and then just let it happen.
Okay. Yeah. You're ever guilty of putting on a good rom-com or a good you know is going to, you know, you can just sit down and have a good cry over, or is that not one of
Yeah, I mean, I love searching Sandra Bullock on my
Okay.
on my Netflix Prime, because I just, I love all those movies from that time. I really don't mind. I don't mind a good cry. I don't mind a good. I don't really throw tantrums. I'm not a tantrumy kind of person. But when I'm angry, I allow myself to be angry. That doesn't necessarily mean like I start shouting. I allow myself to be angry on my own, and then that gives me the space to then deal with it better.
Yeah. You mentioned time, and I can't really ignore that, because I think a lot of people who've come to talk to us over the past sort of year on the Fashion Means Business talks have shared, when they've spoken about COVID, how actually COVID's given them time. do you think as we go back into normality, as we're sort of going along this roadmap out of COVID, do you think you will be better at putting aside time in the future? Do you think we will be better at putting aside time in the future? Or do you think we're going to go back to those crazy busy times that we had before COVID?
I don't know. I mean, humans are like rubber bands. Like, I think we can, like, you know, twang back like quite easily. And I think people are craving for it to go back.
Yeah.
You know, everyone wants to, I mean, as soon as shops open, people were lining outside shops, you know, people are sort of like craving that sort of, I don't know whether it's nostalgia or genuinely like, we must shop again, you know. I think it could go either way. I mean, for me, in terms of time, I might be guilty of going back to the way things were, but in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose you learn from experience, don't you?
Yeah.
From life, you know, what you need to take. Okay, so you're best known for designing shoes, but you are also behind Company X. Would you mind sharing with us, you know, a little bit more about what is Company X?
Well, it's sort of an evolution of kind of like the the journey into sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, shoes are just the worst things for landfill. They're just like the villain of fashion in terms of eco and I mean, it's just terrible. And it was something like myself and my product developer always used to say, because it's not just to the environment, you know, it's costly too, like monetary wise. So
Yeah.
whenever a mistake is made on the track or something, it gets thrown, you know, literally just the easiest thing for them to do is just go and chuck it. So not only does that end up in a pile somewhere, but I've also paid for it. So sustainability to me, that's why I just think when people go, oh, it's too difficult, it's costly to change our ways, I just think it's so costly not to.
Yeah.
Because I paid for that thing you chucked away, you know, that's the reality of it. So Company of X really was an extension of that, of me slowly realizing like, oh, you know, really doing not very nice things to the environment. And it's a move towards trying to create something that's beautiful. Because in my journey also to trying to be zero waste, is there wasn't necessarily anything out in the market that I think is like a true alternative to what I would have in my home or on my feet. So I think in sustainability, it's very important to offer the customer a true alternative, which is just as good or better. Because how frustrating is it when you use a bamboo toothbrush and it falls apart in your mouth? It's like, that's really no incentive for me to look after the planet at all, because quite frankly, that's a step back in terms of design. So it's really the responsibility of the designer and the creator to be able to provide either equal or better being like the, you know, the unicorn, and to do that. And then you can truly start, I wouldn't say convincing, but truly start making people see sustainability in a really good way and a plausible alternative.
You know, having worked in the fashion industry myself, I know often you have businesses that kind of sustainability is often sort of an afterthought. How vital do you think it is for sustainability considerations to be taken at initial product development and design stage?
Like, so vital. Like the most vital it can be, because when we think about designing, say like it's a product, right? And we go, this is the brief.
Yeah.
Say you have a pen, it needs to write. That's part of the brief. Now, it's no different to say part of the brief is that this needs to then biodegrade.
Yeah.
It's actually part of design. It's part of the process. So why leave it out? And so I think the future is and should be that it gets written in right at the beginning.
And then carries on through. There's been a lot in the press recently about COVID being a catalyst for, sustainable way of thinking. And yeah, there was a recent survey that was conducted by Capgemini that revealed that 79% of those surveyed are changing their purchasing preferences. They surveyed a series of consumers and they're changing their purchasing preferences based on sustainability. And this contrasted really sharply with 36% of organizations who believed customers are willing to base their choices on social and environmental impact. Do you think we are changing as consumers? And do you think that's something that the industry needs to wake up to?
I think the key word there is willing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes back to what I was saying about alternatives. I don't necessarily think, I mean, with figures, I'm always a little bit, not skeptical, but like, but with figures are not necessarily facts. If I presented you with a really nice, a gorgeous shoe that you absolutely fell in love with, and then I presented you with it's all right, it kind of looks all right, but it's sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would probably go for the beautiful shoe.
Yeah. I think if we're all honest, we'd go like, yeah, whatever, I like that one. Which is why sustainable design needs to be appealing and desirable.
Yeah.
So I think, and you know, and when we talk about consumers, we're consumers too. Designers are consumers too. Mm-hmm. So we're in that really great place, you know, creatives are in that really great place to make that decision to be like, we're going to create something that's beautiful and sustainable, as opposed to going, you know, it's the consumer that chooses. That's, it's neither here nor there for me. It's really like, if something is, you want it on your foot, you want it on your, you know, you want to wear it, you want to use it, that is what causes people to buy it.
Yeah. So it's about having a beautiful product fit for purpose, but that is sustainable.
Yeah. So like I said, I think the key word in that passage was willing, because it's like the choice. So people, it's great. I think it's fantastic. People are more open to buy sustainable things, but why can't those two be the same thing, like sustainable and beautiful?
And I do sometimes wonder, like sustainability is not a new thing. Having been in the industry for a similar length of time to you, we've been talking about sustainability. You know, we've had recyclable materials, we've had organic materials. You know, I've worked for businesses and launched collections. But I think where perhaps I've gone wrong, or businesses have gone wrong, is that because it's a worry that the cost of the garment is going to be more expensive, and therefore that's going to result in a higher selling price. We've been guilty maybe of dumbing down designs just to keep the cost down. So it's not uncommon to find not such a beautiful shoe as you gave as an example, but that's sustainable. And I think, you know, that needs to change, because I imagine you can design a beautiful shoe that is sustainable. I imagine. I don't know.
Yeah.
Beatrix, yeah.
Yes, you can. I mean, at the moment, I mean, sneakers, the exhibition at the Design Museum in London opens next Tuesday, and there's a whole room on it on sustainability, and materials that are being used. Like you said, it's not new. It's just that in the past, it's either been dumbed down, or it's been like, we want people to know it's sustainable, so therefore we want it to look like mud. You know what I mean? Like, so it's
organic. Look.
Yeah, really, it's organic because it looks organic. You know, like it's never been like, well, let's just make it look the best it can possibly look, regardless. But I think it's really, you know, it's really exciting times now. I mean, I mentor a startup in mycelium leather, and you know what we talk about is, again, that alternative, right, of going like, you know, what can leather do that we need this to do? But also at one point I was like, so why does it need to look like leather?
Yeah, good point. As long as it looks beautiful.
Can we not just make something completely new? It's amazing, only mycelium can do it. You know, so we put these restrictions on ourselves. I mean, but all the research and the technology and the fact that these bigger brands, Kanye's Yeezy, made out of, you know, harvested algae, all this sort of being highlighted is only a really good thing.
Okay, so one thing when we discussed sort of ahead of this talk, you were quite eager to share advice to graduating students. So we have had students that have just submitted their final major projects, or who are in the process soon to submit their final major projects. And I think, well, having spoken to students across courses, there is a fair amount of anxiety. I think there's naturally anxiety normally, you know, going into the unknown. But I suppose at the moment that's possibly heightened by the fact that, you know, there's so much negativity in the press about the fashion industry and redundancies and the state of the fashion industry. And you know, we can just walk down any one of our high streets. I mean, I'm going to give Oxford Street as an example, just because I was down there the other day, but there's a lot of closed stores down there. So what sort of advice could you give to students that are soon to graduate?
Is don't be afraid.
Okay.
I mean, we were all there, right? We were all
yes.
there. I remember sort of giving a talk once where college was like, come in, talk about your career. And I was like, look what I've done in the last, blah, blah, blah. And then almost every question at the end was like, we just don't know what we're doing next week, like after we graduate. And I was like, oh, that's what I wanted to talk about, is there are choices, right? And that's like one thing that I always wish that perhaps someone, if I could go back in time and tell myself something, it's like, you have options. There's always options. Before college, there was school. Like when I've gone back to like school, when I've gone to schools and gone, you know, spoken to A-level students, they're always like, we just want to get into this college, whether it be London College of Fashion, St. Martin's, you know, London College of Communication. Like, these are the schools we want to go to. That's then compounded by the fact that you have to make those choices on your application. So you're like tunnel vision. And I was like, those might not be the right places for you. you might flourish somewhere else in another college, you know, like you might actually, you're more technical, you might suit this college.
Yeah.
And so always remember there are choices. And when you come out of university, I always feel like, you know, that's the final push out the nest. That's gotta get a job next year. And it's scary. It's scary. We've all been there. But there are options. And they come from all over. I mean, I recently did collaboration with Viacom on SpongeBob SquarePants. If I knew half of those jobs that people have there, like discussing the color of Patrick's pants, you know, or do you know what I mean? Like, that's a job. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, if someone told me that like 20 years ago, that may be what I'd be after, you know? There's a whole world out there, and there's space for everyone in what you're doing. It's infinite. And that's the thing. I think, as human beings, we're infinite, and even more so, we're in touch with that when we're creative. And so I have said before in the past, you know, if you think about musicians and you think about music, there are only 8 notes. It's an octave. That's it, right?
That's very
You
true.
have variants of lower and higher, but that is it. That's all we've got. Yet, centuries after centuries, people are able to make amazing music. And I would say that is not to be fearful, and don't forget that there are choices, and it's infinite, and your ability is infinite.
So how do you think you find out more about these jobs that perhaps, because, you know, I suppose we know the common sort of jobs, and actually I've spent a bit of time going into secondary schools trying to share some of the opportunities within the fashion industry, and invariably, you know, everybody knows what designer does and everybody knows what fashion marketing is, but, you know, perhaps some of these more obscure sort of roles, like how could students perhaps find out a bit more about them?
Well, now you have this thing called the internet.
But where to start? What to Google search? You know, Patrick's pants.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ways I think, you know, and, you know, I'm 45 now. And so I feel like there's like, you know, a lot of things I know now is just through experience, but working with people has been a major door opener in terms of not just how you get work, but also know how, like, what else is out there. So I think it's always important to stay open, no matter what you're doing, right? So, I mean, I used to make tea because it's like the first thing you're allowed to do, right? Like when you're interning, is like, that is what you're responsible for. And through making tea for people, I met other people, right? Like you take your tea to people, you slowly start talking, and then you get to know them, and then they're like, oh, you know, there's this thing that, did you know? I mean, I think it's like so important to be able to listen to people, because that's how you learn. Like, you have infinite learning when you listen really well. And so it's sometimes, you know, it comes out of that. I mean, okay, to go to this, back to the SpongeBob SquarePants, because that's like the first example I can think of, you know, that really came out of me talking to someone about my book.
Okay.
And that's how it started. It was like, do you know anyone that knows anything about books? And then you meet someone, and then they start, you know, and then it was like someone goes, oh, might know someone from Nickelodeon, they might be able to give you advice on it. So, you know, I wasn't looking for a collaboration, I wasn't looking for a project, but these conversations are all very open. And then it was like, you know, speaking to someone from Nickelodeon, and then they were like, you know, would you like to collaborate on this project? You know, and that project to me brought so much joy. And not only so much joy, it solidified my my relationship with Colette. That was really important at the time. You know, sadly, but you know, this is before it closed, and it was really at the height.
Collect in Paris, you're referring to.
Yeah. Solidified that relationship. We launched it with Colette. It went on to other things. Pharrell got the whole collection. When, you know, do you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah.
I never think to do things thinking like, I'm going to do this because it's going to go there. It's like, if you do this and you stay open, it might take you there. And then you stay open and it might take you there. And that's how really you find out about the world and how much choice there is. So in terms of finding a job, just do something is what I'd say, because everything you do is going to be so valuable. And even if it wasn't the one you wanted, or wasn't, you know, wasn't what you expected to do, stay really open, because it will bring you to things that you would never have imagined.
Sometimes I think of life as sort of stepping stones, and, you know, you're trying to go from one side of the river to the other. And, you know, there might be the most direct route where you just follow a line of stepping stones, but life doesn't ever seem to be like that. Sometimes, you know, you end up going on sort of a stepping that's a bit of a tangent, and you're sort of left wondering, you know, why have I taken that stepping stone? But then later on, and sometimes this could be like a few months later or a few years later, you suddenly reflect and go, oh, so now I know why I ended up on that stepping stone. You know, that was part of my journey, I suppose, to get to the other side.
Yeah, hindsight's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the other thing I would say, is to like have faith and trust, because it's not until, like you say, it's not until you get to the other side you go, oh, that's why that happened. And at the time it can be so uncomfortable, it can be like a terrible thing. But when I look back on some of the hardest moments of my life, I honestly go, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah. So I feel like we've done lots of chatting. I suppose my last sort of question will be around your book. So perhaps you could just sort of share a few insights into your publication. It'd be really interesting, I think, for listeners today to understand a little bit more the thought process behind your bee traveling through life.
Well, I went through an incredibly difficult, and it was a prolonged, it was like a prolonged trauma. And the way I thought about it when I got spat out the other end was like, if something good was going to come out of it, like, what would that be? And I was like, well, at the time, I didn't have the tools to deal with what was going on. And, you know, I very much sort of shaped them myself, and like looked in so many different places, like looked at, you know, from everything from yoga to sort of therapy to, you know, wellness, all of that, to shape my own tools to be able to deal with that better. And one of the things that kept coming back is this feeling of not being in control. And so this big and terrible and ugly thing, I thought, I'm going to make it pretty and I'm going to make it really light and, you know, so hence why I sort of took it and then made it into a children's book, which is, you know, perhaps what is traditionally like the most pure and innocent and light thing you could think of. So my thought process behind it was, what can I tell my goddaughter or my godson about what I went through, and how could it help them? And so the book really is about resilience, about something really dark and terrible happening, but not blaming anyone. So there's no blame, there's no like they did this, or, you know, it's really about finding strength in yourself and realizing that you have everything you need. I mean, even scientifically, you know, our body automatically takes things, makes it useful for us, and then gets rid of the rest, right? Like, and we don't even think about it, like it just does it automatically. So how do we do that? How do we allow ourselves to do that mentally, and then realizing that we have everything we need to help us carry on and to get up and to keep going?
And you say it's a children's book, but having read it, you know, it's beautifully illustrated. And I don't know, when I was reading it, I felt it was very applicable to my age. And, you know, sadly, I'm no longer a kid, but I would say that it's, you know, the story is, well, when you read the story, it gives some very valuable insights and advice on how to deal with those challenging times and how to get out of those dark moments, which the bee finds him or herself in. I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was a female or male bee, but yeah, really lovely way, I suppose, to share how to be more resilient and how to cope with those challenging times, which, you know, we find ourselves in. So Beatrix, I'd really like to open up the floor to sort of any questions that we might have from those that are with us today. So please, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat. I do already have one question. So it's an anonymous question, so I can't say who's asking it, but the question is, when did you decide that you wanted to be a fashion designer? Or it says, when did you decide that you can be a fashion designer? So I don't know whether there's probably two questions there. When did you find you could be a fashion designer, or when did you find that you wanted to be a fashion designer?
I never wanted to be a fashion designer. When did I know I could?
Do you think it's something you're naturally good at? Because sometimes, you know, life can be hard, but I think if you fall into something that you generally are you know, are good at, and you find relatively easy, I'm not saying that designing is easy, but, you know, it's easier for some than for others, then sometimes that makes your journey easier. I don't know.
I think that the beginning of that is to enjoy what you do.
Okay, yeah.
And then when you enjoy what you do, you become good at it, because you're putting in that extra sort of, you love it. So you're just like, you're putting in that extra thing. I mean, I used to always be like, I'd have no problem at all, like working until 3 a.m, getting up at 4, then taking a flight. And for me, people would go on, you know, especially if they're like in a very different industry, being like, oh, how do you do that? Why do you work so hard? And it's, well, the simple answer to that is because I don't see it as work. And I remember, actually, this is a good one, like a friend telling me he'd gone on a date with this girl, and she said to him, what do you do for fun? And he went, well, it's the same thing I do for work, you know? So it's like a different way of seeing what you do for a living. I didn't really decide I never decided that I wanted to be in fashion. Actually, I loved the craft of shoes, and I loved like putting things together, and I loved using my hands, and that's all I knew.
That's the secret. So I've just got a message. Oh, great. Okay. So I did get a message to say the Q&A was disabled, but it looks like it's working again. So that's great. Okay. So this is, I'm assuming from someone who isn't a trained designer. Can you give some tips for a cardio surgeon to improve designing? So, you know, if you're not a trained designer, how possibly could you get into design? Any advice? You know, and given that your advice then was that you do what you love, I mean, yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of designers out there who haven't studied designing, but you know, naturally enjoy being a designer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again would be the first point, is go, well, what do I love about design? I mean, do you love architecture? Do you love product? And then look into those things. What do you love within those areas? And then look to learn more about them. And now that could be through education or I mean, for me, there are certain things technically that I had to learn in order to make shoes.
Yeah.
So again, it's about having a toolkit, having the tools to then be able to do what you enjoy and like. So I would look into what it is about design you like and be able to maybe pinpoint. I mean, that's why I think like things like foundation courses are really great, because I mean, I did one because I'm just one of these people that just evidently terrible at making decisions. Like,
or maybe it's your inquisitive mind, you know, you like to try everything, maybe.
That's it. I mean, I'm never like, I'm not like a one sort of chocolate in an assortment kind of person. I'll just eat the whole lot. So if there's some way you can maybe try, like maybe it's not like a big commitment, like a degree, but maybe you do like an hour's course somewhere in footwear design or something, and just to get a taste of what it might be like. And then like incrementally go on to that, and then just build and learn. That's great. Cardiac surgeon wanting to be in design.
Yeah. I mean, you went from graduating to Harper's Bazaar to then Jimmy Choo. So I'm imagining how useful was it sort of doing, I suppose, internships and learning on the job? Do you feel?
So invaluable. So invaluable. I mean, before Harper's Bazaar, that's the internship that's mentioned in the press release. I think I must have done about 20 before that. Okay. You know, I think when I was at college, I was so keen to be like, I am done with learning. I just want to get out there and learn the stuff out there.
Yeah.
That if there was anything going, I'd be like, I'll do it. And like I said, you know, I mean, the result is I'm not just saying this as people tell me, I make an awesome cup of tea because I made so many. But it's the only way for me. I mean, everyone's different, but like I said, I am quite inquisitive. So it was the only way for me to discover what I liked and what I didn't like. Yeah. And so all that experience, I mean, that's why I say, like, if you go out and just do something, it will still teach you like just an awful lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not like, I've never been hugely egotistical. So for me, it's like, if I'm gonna, like I applied to work in pubs and restaurants, and because there's a practicality, right? Like there's like, well, this is my dream job, I would love to do this, but I also have to eat.
Well, you need money, don't you?
Yeah.
Especially in London.
And so sometimes those other jobs are like, they're just sometimes more valuable than the ones you do that you end up in the industry of, because it gives you that much wider. I mean, I used to be the Saturday girl at Lily White's.
Okay.
And so in the golfing department and then the football department, I know nothing about football, but I could tell you an awful lot about the kids. And I really learn how, I'm instinctively, I'm like quite an introvert, but I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to listen to what it is that they wanted. Even the way they folded stuff, even the way it was displayed. And so when it came to like opening my own shops, it was there. It was like in my memory. It was like, we don't do it like this because everyone will turn left here. And that was from just Saturdays selling what I used to call golf bats.
That's your stepping stone. That's a bit off center, which at the time you probably didn't think was going to really reap any sort of benefits to your future journey, but actually it did. So just, I suppose, to give a taster, because actually part of my role is guiding students on their placement year, and often we get students who've got a very set idea of what they want to do. But I think what would be quite interesting to know is if you could just maybe list some of the placements you did, because I'm kind of imagining that they perhaps weren't all design placements. I might be wrong, but
no, they weren't. So Harper's Bazaar wasn't a design placement. Which is the one I was going for. So I actually wanted to be in the art department. I was like, because my degree was in graphics.
Okay.
And so I was like, I want to be in the art department. That's what I want to do. And they were like, we have a place in fashion. And I was like, oh, okay.
We'll take that then.
I'll take that. And the way I got that placement was I called.
Okay.
This is like in 96. And I was very specific in what I wanted to do. And so I think that helped a lot. It wasn't just like, I kind of want to maybe do whatever. I was like, I'd really love to see how that department works. I'd really love to meet someone if I can. So I was very specific, not in a pushy way. Appreciated these people who were super busy. Always respectful, but then clear about what I'd want, and then also what they perhaps could get out of me.
Yeah.
And that's cold calling. So, I know what it's like to like, sort of feel a bit scared and be like, but I'm just nothing. I'm a nobody, I remember sort of going to a lecture, and as I came out the lecture, went to the toilet or something, and the person that was lecturing was there, and I just felt like, okay, this is my chance to sort of go, can I do this? And so never approach anyone in the toilet. No, outside is okay, inside is not. But that's what I mean about sort of staying open, is that the worst that can happen is they say no.
Yeah. I have heard of students finding roles through social media. You know, they've like commented on someone's post on Instagram or through Twitter. Actually, there was I did some work with ASOS, and one of the girls on the marketing team had actually got a role through reaching out to ASOS via Twitter. So, you know, I think there's that face-to-face opportunity to ask outside the toilet, of course, not in the toilet, but there's also plenty of other sort of ways that you can reach out. And yes, I know it might be scary, it might be daunting, but the worst they can say is no. And if they say no, you're probably never going to see them again anyway. So don't worry about it too much.
That's why it's always important to always be respectful. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that things have cropped up again much later on. I mean, I remember I was having like quite an important meeting, very high level. And the person that I had it with was like, oh, you know, we met someone that met you once when you were 19. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. They're like, you know, they always said you were always really lovely and helpful. And I was like, phew.
Yeah.
You might see them again. But the thing is that choice is like, that's why you got to be respectful, is because you're staying open. And so the worst thing that can happen is they say no. But the best thing that can happen is infinite.
Yeah.
And that's like, to me, if you're trying to make a decision, that's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So on a slightly different vein, there's a question here from Anna. And Anna's asking, she's currently deciding on her topic for her dissertation for a thesis. And she's wondering if you had any suggestions on possible gaps that she could explore in the fashion industry. Now, Anna hasn't indicated whether that's in design or just generally across the fashion industry. And I'm afraid I don't know what course Anna's studying, but any thoughts? Beatrix?
There are so many gaps.
Yeah.
There are so many gaps.
Where to start?
Yeah, where to start? That's like a big, I mean, I did my dissertation on beauty.
Okay. Nothing to do with footwear?
No. In photography, and then ended it on sort of like it being sort of the perception, what a consumer sees on the other side of what they're being shown and sold. So gosh.
So Anna's actually added,
okay.
she's currently studying strategic fashion marketing.
Oh, strategic fashion marketing. Okay. I mean, for me, I'm really fascinated in the whole digital thing. But it'd be interesting for me anyway, to find out how marketing online can really, you know, because at the moment, I don't think that there is a true seamless digital to bricks and mortar or in-person way of marketing at the moment. My lowbrow thought, though, is why isn't there ever a good perfume advert ever?
Perfume advert?
They're always so bad.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you buy perfume based on, well, I do anyway, on smell. And actually, how do you make smell something tangible, I suppose?
Exactly. So it's these things that are like, that you need, that you buy, that you definitely need an offline experience. What's the best strategy in designing something that starts online to then convert into offline?
Yeah.
I mean, that for me would be like an interesting.
And actually, going back to, you said you did your thesis on beauty, but that was one of the biggest challenges that beauty brands faced in lockdown, is that a lot of beauty and buying beauty is about testing it. You know, you go to a store, you test the foundation on your skin color, you know, you check out how, you know, an eyeshadow might look on you, or a lip color. And actually there's been huge advancements in that side of the business, accelerated by COVID, because suddenly beauty brands have realized that something that's very physical, a bit similar to perfume, I suppose, they've had to make digital. Just on that digital vein, I was at a business and fashion talk yesterday, actually, and they were talking about, you know, the kind of virtual world of fashion and virtual collections, which I find quite fascinating. And I've got a couple of children, and I know how much they spend on their avatar, and it's frightening. And actually, I do think that's possibly an area that is going to be very much more of the future, because we've got a generation growing up quite happy to spend money on a digital outfit.
I know, I find that stuff
looking at avatar is really important.
I find that so exciting. I remember actually, I mean, it was about, I want to say 15 to 20 years ago, when we got approached to go, would you have, you know, be interested in having like a shop on The Sims or something? You know, and it sort of, you know, and I remember at the time going, whoa, that's like, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a whole other world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Literally.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions. So do you believe the future of fashion will be a lot less about seasons? So we'll have seasonless collections?
Yes, I do.
Move to a more sustainable world.
Yeah, because I mean, do we have seasons now? Not really. We have snow in April. We have summer in October. Yeah, we just don't have season, you know, and I think this is the thing that I think wholesalers have been grappling with in the last couple of years, you know, is taking in autumn winter stock where you traditionally start selling it in July. And people going, no, there's a heat wave happening, don't want to buy boots. So I just think because the world is changing, I know we want to call it like pre-season, you know, resort, and really it should, instead of it being 18 different seasons, it should really just be at the most 2.
And the craziness of those sort of pre-seasons, spring, summer, when, I mean, my background's buying, it's not design, but when I buy a collection, I wouldn't think about what season it is. I would think about when I was selling it. So you would be bringing in autumn, winter in July, for example, but I would be very much looking at sort of transitional product, which someone would want to wear in July, because otherwise it's just going to sit there in your stores and not sell. And we had a previous speaker that came in from PVH, and they spoke about how actually in lockdown, they started off the kind of pandemic with too much stock. So they didn't order anymore, and they sort of sat on that stock, and then they suddenly realized there was a demand. And so then they started selling that stock, and then they started running out of stock. So instead of going to end of season sale, as they traditionally would in June for the end of spring, summer, they actually held on to their stock and continued selling at full price till September. And they realized that the customer was very happy to still buy, you know, spring, summer stock at full price in September.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, listen, with well, previously travel, you know, people running around just in December trying to look for swimwear, nightmare. But also from a like supplier point of view, you know, we used to sell worldwide. And so when you've got customers in Australia, you're having to make those boots in summer anyway. And you know, so I mean, it comes down to wastage, and what you're saying about like having too much. That's really the issue. Like the traditional business structure is to be like, oh, we need to sell more, therefore we need to make more. But then that doesn't always translate to, oh, but then it sells more.
No.
Then you have like, I mean, when you see some of the sales and you go like 70-80% off, that's where you know that there's a real issue with holding too much stock. And so, like you say, the customer is quite happy buying these things all year round, especially when you have something trans-seasonal or something practical like a sneaker, for example.
Yeah, it's not a given, is it? If you produce 5% more stock, that you're going to see a 5% increase in sales.
That's the biggest mistake.
You need to realize that
making is going, you know, I mean, okay, I mean, maybe this doesn't apply to students so much, but when you're writing your P&Ls and your business plan, it's like, oh, we want to make 3 million next year, so therefore we're going to sell 500,000 shoes, right? And you make that decision, and then you order 500,000 shoes, and then you spend the rest of that season going, oh, I hope we sell 500,000.
Yeah, sleepless nights.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And that's why I think in terms of sustainability, it's not just about the environment, it's not just about the economics, it's not just about the social economics, but also the way we think and the way the industry's been quite greedy in the past.
Yeah.
Right, so it's like constant. I mean, I like for a very big brand, I won't mention who, but you know, I made a joke once because he was late to meet me for dinner. This was in Shanghai, and I was like, okay, what's your excuse? And he's like, oh, we were doing forecasts. And I was like, I can tell you your forecast. Your forecast is like double-digit growth year on year for 5 years. And he was like, how do you know? And I was like, that's what everyone writes.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't necessarily mean that it happens.
Yeah. And actually, we do talk about the triple pillars of sustainability: planet, which we've spoken about quite a bit today; people, which is all the ethical, social, human rights side; and then profit. So, you know, needs to be consideration to those 3 factors. So Beatrix, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of, really interesting discussion. So thank you very much for giving up your time today. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. And thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Words of wisdom are going to help students venture into the new brave world that they're soon to enter.
And I hope I've been able to answer all the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone has any, they can always contact me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to everyone for attending.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.